Hey everyone, we've been inviting you to participate in an upcoming Civic Labs by CVH on generative journalism. And I have here with me today Peter Pula, and he is the creator of generative journalism. Peter, can you tell us why you think people should join us? What's in it for them?
Well, they'll join you if they know what's good for them.
Of course. Love it.
Well, we were talking earlier, Risha, and we were saying that there's a few ways to look at generative journalism. One is through the practitioner's lens. The other one is through the institutional lens. So if you're running an organization, we might talk about different things than if we're talking to somebody who's in the field practicing. And generative journalism over the last 25 years is actually born, created, practiced, refined in institutional contexts, in
Mm.
organizational contexts, because there's something that the organization has to offer that general society doesn't, and that's some boundaries. So when you look at news being wacky and crazy and too much to handle out there in the world, it's because it's not grounded, it's not rooted. Whereas if you ground and root generative, as in a possibility oriented journalism within the context of an organization or community who has a mission and a mandate that shapes and frames everything they're doing, suddenly you have a very, very, very powerful practice for surfacing what actually wants to happen in your community. And you're
Mm.
doing it in such a way that you are always and at the same time cultivating a narrative that's emerging from the field. This becomes powerful for all kinds of reasons.
Right. Beautiful. Yes, we have been using generative journalism in our work, and I know this to be true. We have been using it for qualitative data collection in actual fact, so that we have first-person account of what is actually happening on the ground in community. And we're able then to do an analysis of all of those stories to be able to tell a wider community story about what is possible when things come together. Um, I know that organizations are concerned about funding
Mm-hmm.
and be able to telling their story of impact. Can you share how you think generative journalism would help an organization in terms of advancing their cause by learning about this craft?
Yes, you can probably go on for quite some time. I think number one, uh, generative journalism has an opening premise that we are pursuing the stories of the people in an
Mm.
organization, not the organization story itself. When an organization simply says something, it's one voice and it's usually highly politicized and sterilized. It's easy to contradict, it's even easy to deny. However, if the organization has convened the storytelling of many, many people, individuals, suddenly there are many voices that represent what's going on in an organization, in a community, and these things cannot be denied. They come with the credibility of many independent individual voices on the same subject. It's very, very powerful proof in the pudding as to the effects and outcomes an organization is having.
I love that.
What's more, it can even, because of its generative nature, as in it's always looking for possibility, you can surface things from the field that inform your direction that you might not otherwise have seen. So, and not only that, you surface them in such a way that other people are already involved. Because they're already involved, it makes it much easier to make things happen.
Mm.
As you tell those stories of the things that have been made to happen and what happens as a result, and then what's happening now, you also build this swath of stories that prove that your organization is getting things done in the field. So
Love
I
that.
can't imagine how a funder wouldn't look very highly upon that kind of qualitative data, which also happens to be reflected in the public eye.
Yeah. Love that. And I know for us, it's been an opportunity to ensure that the voice of lived experience, whether that be youth stories or folks who are experiencing food insecurity or particular challenges in community, that it brings their voices right to the forefront as you're doing that. So it runs double duty, this generative
Does.
journalism. One of the things I love about it so much is that we have a bit of a motto in our organization, everything for two reasons. And I think generative journalism is probably everything for maybe three or four reasons, because I think it's
Absolutely.
also, um, you know, you and I chatted earlier about partnering, in the partnership. Often a story shows your connection to other people in community as well and other organizations. I think that's also really powerful. The stories are so cup half full as well. I find that they're rather that the methodology is trauma informed. People leave an interview feeling energized and feeling
Yes.
good about where they're going and what their contributions are to a given situation. And it also leaves lots of room for calls to action. So I think there's the funding and telling the story and the brand that your organization has, but there's also an advocacy opportunity through generative journalism as well, that we really appreciate in terms of hearing what it is that people in community need to see more of for them to thrive in community, and or for organizations to thrive in our community. So I think that's also a really an important part of generative journalism and one of the outcomes that you can drive from it. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. And one of
Absolutely.
the generative journalism, because it emphasizes direct and lived experience and the gifts and the strengths of the person who's being interviewed, every interview is actually an act of healing.
Mm,
Most people who respond to a generative interview find that they've come to an insight they didn't already have, or they've identified something that they can do, where a place where they can actually exercise their agency, and they're also identifying what they'd like from the community in order to exercise their agency. So the
mm,
very act of participating in an interview like this, which is then published, does actually build strength and capacity in both the person and in the community around them.
mm, absolutely. So I'm gonna we'll leave it there, but just to encourage people to have a look at what we have to offer. It's a three-part series on generative journalism with an opportunity to also follow along for a year afterwards to hone your craft and check in and have a community of folks who are trying something new. We think this is about a story-powered future for our community, and
Ooh, I like that. A story
stories
powered
have connect.
future.
Yeah, stories are key to connection, and we think that connection changes the world. And this is an important thing for you to be part of. So check out the details on our website, and we'd love to have you part of it. You get to meet Peter. Peter will be there for all three parts of the series, and you're going to hear from the creator of this incredible craft. We hope that you'll join us.